Welcome everybody to today's Member Forum meeting. Some safety information first. I'll go through it quite quickly. Would like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. Exit the building from the nearest exit and congregate by the cathedral. Full details of the questions submitted to Member Forum and the Mayor's written replies were published on the Council's website. Groups have submitted their questions in priority order and are presented rotating around the party groups. Each councillor has asked a maximum of 2 questions about one topic or 2 separate questions about 2 different topics. Councillors have a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. If a councillor asks 1 question, they have 1 supplementary. If a councillor asks 2 questions, they can ask 1 supplementary question per question asked. Thank you. Okay, straight to the questions. So the first question we have is from Councillor Marley Bennett. Is Marley here? No, okay. I don't have anything highlighted here to say who is here, so I'll just go through the questions. So the second question is from Ed Plowden, who's not here. John Geeta. Okay. Alex Hartley, I did see Alex on the way in, so we've got a starter for 10 there. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you very much, Mayor, for your written response to my question. In terms of a supplementary, I wanted to ask why, when we currently have a building for the Central Library that generates income on an annual basis, would we look to change to another venue where we would have to pay income on rent on an annual basis?
Yeah, I'm not sure on your logic. I mean, the library costs, a lot of money to run, and we are in unprecedented, levels of challenge facing local government finance for us and others. And as we've been clear with people from the start, there are things we are having to talk about now that we wish we'd never have to talk about. It's also worth bearing in mind, and if you ever come into leadership, you'd begin grappling with this, is in this moment in time, we're not comparing ourselves to what we wish we could be, right? We're comparing ourselves to what a local authority would look like if commissioners came in after us issuing a 114 and took control of our budget. So that is the point of comparison. And what we need to do is to make sure that doesn't happen by facing up to the difficult challenges and difficult decisions we'll have to make, and that means everything has to be on the table, and things cannot be ruled out until we have shown a way of clearing the level of savings we have to make, as unpalatable that is. And we can walk around promising people the moon on a stick all day, but the scale of challenge we face, as I said, is one that just forces us into situations where we have to look at things that we previously wouldn't have looked at.
Thank you. Do you have a second supplementary?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Has the administration costed the potential options for housing the library in either the Debenhams building or in Broadmead?
We're in early days at the moment, and we're looking at all the options. It's worth bearing in mind that the speed with which the scale of the challenge has been revealed to us again has been quite incredible, actually. The acceleration in the interest rate increase, the increase in inflation, the revelation of the shortages in the labour supply. Obviously, we saw the context unrolling at a national level that has rolled down onto the shoulders of local government. So we're having to do lots of very quick work with a team, dare I would add, and I think there is some self-reflection on your party's behalf to look here that austerity has not just meant the impact on frontline services, which is an issue that's going to come up later. Austerity's also meant an impact on backroom capacity. Right? The accountants, the lawyers, the planners, all those roles that no one campaigns for with protest, no one even campaigns for in this chamber, but nonetheless are essential at times like this for the functioning of the local authority and to keep the cogs of the city lubricated. And so we are doing that. We are doing all that work, but with a very challenged organisational capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you. if you all trust me, I'm just going to go through the questions and ask the people who I see sitting here to answer them. So I go straight now to Richard Eddy with his question on strategic transport and city design.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Question one, firstly. Clearly, the Mayor is somewhat demop happy before being thrown out in almost 17 months' time. Since he failed to answer my first question, can I repeat? Please specify and outline your proposal, please.
Well, this is making sure, this is basically bringing into alignment the location of that strategic transport function with where the powers are. And it is worth remembering that, and I know you were in the chamber at the time, that this chamber actually voted for the combined authority, which, and the order which put the powers within the combined authority. So unless people actually didn't do the work at the time, they shouldn't be surprised that the strategic transport powers are actually with the combined authority, at this time. I do. I know you have a carefully crafted brand developed over the, I don't know how many years you've been elected. I think it's quite some time, and I appreciate that. But I do find it surprising. I would have thought you'd been a fan of smaller government within your brand, but it seems like you pick on a number of different positions. But that aside, this is about making sure that the staffing capacity is in line with where the powers actually are, and the strategic transport powers are with the combined authority. We will retain our powers as local authority to say yes, no, on what happens inside our boundaries. But it's about getting better organised on a regional level.
Councillor Eddy, do you have a second supplementary?
Question two, or answer two. This may surprise the Mayor because it expresses the sympathy for his position. But bearing in mind, in my view, WECA is dysfunctional and that Metro Mayor can't be bothered to turn up to some meetings, what real guarantee can Bristolians have?
Well, it may surprise you to know that nothing that comes from you surprises me, Councillor Eddy. But that aside, good point. Well, this is part of investing. This is part of our efforts to invest in the combined authority as well, to make sure it is functional. We can see really strong combined authorities, up north with Andy Burnham, Steve Rotherham. I'd also, add Andy Street in the Midlands, and we have got good presence down here in the Bristol City region with national government. Hence, we're asked to do lots of roles with core cities, LGA, COP, and the rest of it. But part of the responsibility for making that work is for us to be well organised at the city region level. And I think that making sure that the right resources are in the right places will be part of us meeting the challenge of being better organised as a city region. And I think this could be a really important contribution to that regional organisation.
Thank you. We now move on to Lib Dem question 2, which is Andrew Varney. You've got one question on housing. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. So apologies to the Mayor if my question wasn't very clear. I was actually referring to the Brislington Greenbelt and not the Brislington Meadows, which is actually in Brislington East and not part of the Greenbelt. So it's about the Brislington West Greenbelt, which stretches from the Park and Ride down to and including the former Wyvale Garden Centre. So we know that developers are itching to develop that land. Bellway Homes are proposing to build 555 housing units on that space. I was just wondering what the Mayor thought about developing that section of the Greenbelt, the Brislington West Greenbelt. Thank you.
So look, what I would say is we bring a number of, what I've tried to say repeatedly is we got to be dealing with the same reality. And sometimes, dare I say, in politics and some of the commentary, I might best describe it at this moment in time, around it, acts as though there is no context to our debates and our dilemmas, as a city. So if I just do it quickly, we're 42 square miles, we're 472,000 people, we're going to be 550,000 people by the middle of this century, and we have 17,000 plus people on our housing waiting list now. We have a crisis, not just in the numbers of homes, but in the affordability of homes. So we have to build houses, right? We have to build houses for the population as it is today, but for the population as it will be over the coming decades. But we're not getting any more land, right? We're not getting any more for them 42 square miles. So we've got to face some big decisions, right? That's why we emphasize building on brownfield sites and at higher density. Every floor we do not put on a brownfield site has to go somewhere, unless we're going to say we're not going to build at all. And then we have to deal with the consequences of not providing enough homes for our housing crisis. It's also going to be true that there's going to be pressure that there will be limited capacity of our brownfield sites. So even if we build out all the brownfield sites as we have identified today, it's still questionable whether that will actually meet our housing need. That's not a political desire to build on land that we don't want to build on. It's just a practical dilemma we face. Our principle would be, and it has been, as you've heard me say many times, we want to build at higher density on brownfield sites, so we don't end up sprawling, right, onto new land. That's what we want to do. And actually we're just writing with Core Cities to Michael Gove to say, look, you've now stepped away from having your housing targets, but you still want to build a high volume of housing. Talk to us as Core Cities and put in the additional money that's needed to bring forward complicated, polluted, whatever it is, brownfield sites, right? And we'll try and consume the pressure on our brownfield land as best we can, and we'll prioritize that. The dilemmas that come upon us when we've totally used up our brownfield capacity, that's gonna be real dilemmas for us, as a city. The principle would always be not to build on new land, certainly not to build on, not to protect land for nature and to build on brownfields. But we have to face up to the pressures of a growing population. So my preference would be no. What Bristol will need in the future will be a debate for Bristol in the future.
Can I just ask a supplementary, my Lord Mayor, if that's okay?
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for that really comprehensive answer, Mayor. Obviously, I think we both agree that we want to develop brownfield sites first, but I wonder is there a mechanism in place to make sure that those brownfield sites are developed first before we then go on to green belt sites? Because, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a developer itching to develop that green belt site in Bristol West, and we'd much rather support the brownfield sites. There are about 5 or 6 brownfield sites in Bristol West coming forward in the next few years, and we really support those, but we'd like those to be developed first, and maybe there wouldn't be a need to develop the green belt. So is there a mechanism in place to kind of make sure brownfield comes first?
Well, there'll be a number. I mean, one in terms of delivery and getting brownfield sites delivered, we've set up our own housing company, as well as working with us, so we can bring forward areas like Baltic Wall, for example. That came forward in the face of considerable opposition and a considerable lack of support, and dare I suggest some political support too. But nonetheless, that's a brownfield site in an active travel zone, exactly the kind of place we need to be building homes, and Temple Quarter and all the rest of it. The other is the local plan. We're working on a 2013 local plan at the moment. We had some challenges with the SDS at regional level, obviously, but we've gone out on our local plan as well, which will obviously allocate sites. And also planning committee. Ultimately, planning committee will say yes or no when schemes come forward, and then it'd be up to a planning committee to take a position on any particular schemes that come through, taking into account affordability, design, biodiversity, and all the rest of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.
Can we move on now to the Knoll Community Party question 2, which is Gary Hopkins?
Thank you.
You have 2 questions, so you have 2 supplementaries.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Seems to be some misunderstanding from yourself and the Cabinet member and senior officers in Parks. We have here an organisation that have already demonstrated that they can take rundown facilities and make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. So whatever centralised structure that you're getting doesn't fit and doesn't get value for money out of an organisation like this?
Are you asking a supplementary question, Gary?
Because we've been at this now for nearly 3 years. Would it not be better to allow officers to negotiate with the club to get this sorted once and for all?
So that's the question.
Look, I think what we'd say to the officers is always up for a conversation, and we're always up for a conversation. But because, as I understand it, there's more than one group potentially interested, we need a process, and people need to work with the process so that everything is fair and above board, and people aren't disadvantaged or led down a route that leads them to use their own resource and ultimately not get a return on the use of their resource. So that's why we want to really stick to the process.
Well, if I could follow up on that.
Is this your second supplementary then, Gary, yeah?
If need be.
No, definitely. It is. As them's the rules.
Firstly, they were the only applicants and were told so by Parks Management. They were the only people who put interest in a partnership with them and the community garden. So to invent somebody new coming along now, 3 years down the line, is not very good faith. The chair of the football club was on Points West last night and will be on Sports Personality of the Year on the 21st of December as an unsung hero in sports. Wonderful job that they've actually done. No doubt you'll be wanting to join us in congratulating him on what he's achieved so far, but will you also apologise for this mess up that's left them without changing rooms for 3 years for Redcatch Park?
Okay, have we got that question?
I think so. So if this is so, a couple of things are moving around here. One is we're asking people to come forward with with a business plan that we can look at. If there's a capacity issue, we have had a capacity issue in the team, and I go back to the point I made to your colleague earlier on. We have recruited to that team now, but we do have to work with the reality that the backroom capacity in the council has been challenged in general, but recently we put a recruitment freeze on as well because of the need to meet the financial envelope we're in, and that may have impacted, if I'm following the question. But capacity is there now, so hopefully people will get the communications that they were looking for.
Thank you, Gary. We'll move on to Labour question 3, which is Brenda Massey. It's a question about waking watchers, and it's just one question. So do you have one supplementary, Brenda? Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Mayor, for the response to my question. It's a shame that Michael Gove hasn't seen fit to respond, but I suppose we should expect that. So can we be assured that the Waking Watch will continue as long as is deemed necessary by all the professional bodies involved in this? Thank you.
Yeah, they have to. Tom's not in process as well, but they have to because of the requirement. I will say, just while I have the floor here, my appreciation to the fire service and the way they dealt with this as well. When this came up, I think a number of people were taken by surprise, to be perfectly frank, at the development, and we knew there would be consequences for other core cities in particular. But the way the fire service worked locally and then worked nationally, I think was really responsible as we thought about consequences for Cardiff, Manchester and other places that had similar cladding, and obviously then worked very constructively with government as well. I will say, Brenda, we are just writing to Michael Gove again, and we are going, off the back of the housing challenges he takes on, and this was agreed with core cities, and I know Tom needs to talk with his peers across the core cities as well. We're making 3 points. One is he needs numbers. Core cities can deliver numbers, but we need to have the relationship there, and obviously we need to talk about finance, mould as well. We look at the state of our housing stock as well, and working with Michael Gove, we believe we can work with government to take concerted action on mould and it's not in any particular order, but safety as well, such as the Wake and Watch and the cladding issues across the city. That's a major financial challenge, to us. Not helped, but might I add, by the rent cap, which is going to cost Bristol about 5 million a year as well on the HRA. We want to position ourselves. We're not having a crack. We're saying, look, we need national government and local government to work together on these challenges that we all want to take on. Let's sit around the table and work out a solution. So there's more to come on that front.
Thank you, Mayor. The next question is Green Question 3. Lisa Stone, you have 2 questions on City Leap. Do you have supplementaries?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much, Mayor Rees, for your response. I'm sure that we all know that any kind of investment that will lead towards decarbonising our city would be really helpful. All I want to know is how you're going to look at the options to explore crowdfunding from a council perspective. Thanks.
With the City Leap partnership, we will be looking at those options. Kai and Craig's not here at the moment. Obviously, Kai's really had hands-on with this, and Craig's been working at the deal. It will be part of the package of innovations that that will be brought in. How big a part of it is questionable. So if we're talking about crowdfunding for a local population, the amount of money we need will not be delivered by that kind of crowdfunding. I mean, what we're talking about in Bristol is £13 billion, including our transport solutions as well. And so, again, I was actually on a phone conversation yesterday with one of the founders of the One charity, if you know Bono and all these people working on it. And they're doing a piece of work, a global piece of work now with the IMF and the World Bank. And it is about how you mobilise the trillions of dollars that are out there and the trillions of dollars that are actually needed to decarbonise our cities on a mass scale. And like I say, in Bristol, I think it's fantastic to get that crowdfunding and the local ownership. We really want to do that. But it will be part of a mix of financial vehicles that we are drawing on.
Do you have a second supplementary?
Yeah, I want to just come back at that. Yeah, I understand that, Mayor Rees. I just think that they do... Yeah, thanks very much. I just think they complement each other, that was all. Of course, we need trillions of pounds worth of funding to really decarbonise our city, but also we can also encourage local investors to also, be part of that ongoing investment and decarbonisation. Thank you.
Okay. So we're moving on then to Conservative question 3, Mark Weston. North Filton Railway Station, 2 questions. Do you have supplementaries?
I do indeed. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Thank you to the Mayor for your responses. And for the record, thank you to your office for reaching out to my previous questions last time round on the A4018. I may not completely disagree with what's come out of it, but I appreciate the conversations. I am aware of the business case that came in on Metro West Phase 2. I'm slightly sceptical of that one because that was the same business case that said only 8 passengers would move on the stretch of line between Henbury and Avonmouth if we went for a loop, so I'm somewhat sceptical. However, I would ask the Mayor if you would look again at the business case. The reason being is since it was first done, you've got the arena moving up into the area, which wasn't there at first, but also the YTL section development was 2,700 homes. It is now a minimum of 3,700 homes, and actually they're trying for 6,700 homes. So I would argue that there is some fundamental change now in the North Filton station catchment area, which would support a higher frequency. So can I ask the Mayor if through Bristol officers and WEC officers, if they can look again at that business case, see if it justifies an increased frequency?
Yeah, we're happy to do that. And I'm sure, Mark, we can make space to make sure you can be involved in those conversations as well, as we talk to the Equine Authority, but as we discuss them locally. So, yeah.
Do you have a second question?
Supplementaries, thank you.
Thank you. So now moving on to Lib Dem question 3, which is Andrew Brown, a question on libraries with a nice table.
Thanks for the response, Mayor. When I raised this in April, and I had some discussions with the libraries team, it was anticipated that the situation would improve over the course of about 6 months because there were some staffing issues and they were looking at recruiting additional staff for the 3 libraries of which Whitchurch Library is a part. So I guess my supplementary is the recruitment freeze being applied to frontline library staff, and is that having an impact on these figures?
Yeah, recruitment freezes apply to everyone. And again, I think we just really need, and I mean, it's obviously you make the decision in your groups, but we do need people to come to grips with the scale of the financial challenge we face. There is no pain-free future for us as a city. We cannot have a 2002 version of Bristol City Council on 2022 money and in a 2022 context. Right? So the council has to be different. And we've set out a number of themes that we have to be working towards. We will have to be a smaller organisation, a more focused organisation, more of a development and an enabling organisation as well, using our input, be it staff time or finance, to enable crowding in of other investment, be it more volunteerism, staffs, or finances in other sources as well. Libraries are part of that very frank conversation we have to have with ourselves about what we're going to be, but also to make sure that we're working with the city to shape what we're going to be. I will share that we had this conversation with a number of our key city partners just last week, at the universities, business, representative unions, voluntary sector, health, faith groups, all met in City Hall for our quarterly meeting together, and we had this conversation. And so one of the things that we are going to be doing is not sitting in a back room designing Bristol City Council in an abstract. We are going to be working with our partners so that they have purchase on the thinking we do and the kind of the maps we put in place for what we will be as an organisation in the years ahead. So, but it's a challenge.
Do you have a second supplementary, Andrew?
I mean, thanks for that answer. My questions were genuinely in relation to the existing service in Whitchurch rather than any potential plans. But yeah, no second supplementary.
So if we could move on now back to Brenda Massey, your question on Ukrainian refugees, please, Brenda. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Yes, I do. But first of all, I'd just like to thank the Mayor for his response to my query about them. And having spoken to a number of people from Bristol with Love for Ukraine, I know how much they appreciate it. But we do have people nearer home that are also in a very poor situation at the moment, particularly with the cold weather. And I wondered if you could outline what help the council can give to them in the same way. Thank you.
So I can just clarification about it. When you say people nearer to home, are there specific groups?
Homeless people living on the streets in the bad weather we've got at the moment.
Okay. Well, we did issue our cold weather emergency alert last week as the cold snap approach. But I mean, we've introduced a range of interventions, be it people suffering from the cold in general. We've obviously been at the start of enabling the citywide network of welcoming spaces, warm places as well. We started work on that incredibly early, so just people in cold homes can go to those and get support. And again, we're not going to overclaim credit. What we did was we put a framework in place and asked for people to come forward, and community groups from across the city came forward to be welcoming places. So it's a real city collaboration, the kind of spirit we saw really evident during COVID. But it's it's the usual support that we do, that assertive outreach through our on-street outreach teams as well, working with the shelters that we have around the city, looking at our emergency accommodation offer for people as well, which we would prefer people weren't in emergency accommodation, but sometimes emergency and then temporary accommodation is the best we can provide in the middle of the housing crisis, going back to Councillor Varney's point earlier on about where we build. I would just add on top of that, by the way, because the point that you'll be very aware of, homeless street rough sleeping doesn't happen in abstract as well. It's not just about bricks and a roof, is it? It's often tied in with mental health. And I don't want to say everyone has every one of these features in their lives, but you will often see the circular self-enforcing of mental health, addictions and criminal justice system all spiralling around that same individual. And so making sure that that assertive outreach that reaches out to people and offers them an appropriate intervention from a trusted source, is also part of our continuing work. I mean, Ellie's on the front of this, with the public health team working collaboratively with our voluntary sector as well.
Thank you. Moving on to Green question 4, which is Martin Fodor. Question about accessible streets. You have 2 supplementaries, Martin.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the replies. However, I did ask about the records of locations where our vehicles, our services, emergency services, so on, can't get through, and I don't feel I've actually been told that. The reason it's important is I assume our client is as concerned as the residents are when collections don't take place and bins are left lying around the pavements for extra days, sometimes an extra week, because of access problems. So I would like to know if there are records of these concerns, because they're affecting our services. The residents in Falmouth Road, Melbourne Road, Monmouth Road, loads of streets that I represent. I've lost count of the times they said we didn't get the collections, the vehicles couldn't get through, or an emergency vehicle potentially couldn't get through, deliveries can't get through. So I'm assuming we are keeping records of these things, and that's what I was asking about.
No, this answer went to you. To be honest, and I wasn't particularly happy when I pursued an answer to this question, because this is a big organisation, as you'll know. You haven't got your fingers on every department, and we're not going to chuck anyone under a bus in this organisation. We work together to try and get good outcomes for Bristol, but sometimes there are systems that don't necessarily work in the way that we would want them to work. What your question seems to have done is shine a light on a system that we don't think is working in the way that it should. I'm not sure that the records are being kept in the way that we want them to be kept. If there are particular hotspots, we should be collecting data that we don't have to go and pursue to find out if there's a hotspot. It should just say there's a number's popped up that says you need to go and have a look at this. Now, it might be that the complexity of the road layout and so forth means it's really difficult to get a solution. In an old city like this, it is. But at least we should know it's difficult to get a solution. So we are going to look into this some more. Bearing in mind other points I made about backroom capacity, but we are going to look at this some more and find out how we can make sure we build that into the way the city works.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary about your leaf fall
Yes,
question?
no, first, thank you. That's a really helpful reply, because people are concerned things haven't been addressed, and there could be signposts to things like protecting corners from road parking. In terms of the street sweeping issues, I mean, literally today, coming through Marlborough Street, as I do to and from every visit to City Hall virtually, on one direction, the leaf mould has been cleared on the designated cycle track, which is a real safety feature when it works. But on the other direction, there's a big pile of leaf mould that could cause someone a nasty accident. So I'm concerned about finding solutions to clean these areas, and snow and ice would be a similar concern, because these are now segregated routes and they're not being swept promptly, and that's my concern for road safety.
That's not really a question, is it? That's just a statement. Is your question, why are both sides of the street not cleared?
Sorry. Have we got solutions to this? Because once we create protected cycle routes, we have to have solutions for them. So I'd like to know that those are part of the plan for keeping routes safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing challenge of running a growing city. Dare I say, too, it's a challenge of having a city with a lot of trees, which we're planting more. That we do get a lot of leaves on the ground. But like I say, that operational challenge is one that we have to go back to Bristol Waste on to make sure they're on top of. I think by their own systems, pointing them to where they should be concentrating their efforts, I would just encourage people to keep feeding back in through the website, so that we can kind of amass that data that says, look, there's an ongoing challenge here, we need to pay particular attention to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on now to Conservative question 4, which is Henry Michelat about the Central Library. Henry's not here, sorry. Steve Pearce, straight on to you, Steve. You've got a question about arson.
I'd like to thank the Mayor for his answer to my question. As supplementary, the Mayor will be aware that myself and some of my colleagues think that the application of these policies is insufficiently robust and therefore likely to lead to continued nuisance, placing the council's property and its tenants at some continued risk. And can the Mayor assure me that we'll do something about this inadequate application of these policies?
So, yeah, we'll pick this up. I mean, our antisocial behaviour policy is different to criminal avenues that could be pursued. But as I've shared with you, I do agree. I don't actually think the response on this has been adequate. I think all of our tenants should know that we care for them. It should be evident in the quality of service they receive from us with their homes. When there are problems with homes, and in any big system there are going to be problems, it should be evident in the quality of response, from the way people talk to them to the timeliness of the turnaround. And when people end up in a situation where they may have problem neighbours or they're feeling bullied and harassed, it should be evident to them in the way that we deal with their situation. And what we don't want to end up, we don't just put people in homes, right? We are supposed to support people in communities. And so everyone should be feeling that. And in this instance, certainly that bar for performance has not been met. And we want to make sure it is met. So we will look at what's happened here. I know Tom will be on the front end of that as well. And to make sure that our tenants, whatever their background, know that we actually care about their lives.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think Tom is indicating that he wants to say something.
Just as a really quick point of information, we've just signed off a new antisocial behaviour policy for housing and landlord services following engagement with colleagues across the chamber earlier in the year. So we'll obviously have new and updated procedures to start implementing as well.
Thank you. Thanks for that extra information. Move on now to Conservative question 5, which is Jonathan Hucker. You've got two questions on financial statements. Do you have supplementaries?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I do. I have a supplementary on question 1, but that's basically because, with respect, I don't think that my original question was answered properly. The original question was, can the Mayor explain why Bristol City Council, alone of the regional authorities, has still not had its annual statement for 2020-21 signed off by auditors? I appreciate that an issue regarding the accounting for infrastructure assets emerged in March 2022. However, by that time the Council had already missed its statutory deadline for completion by 6 months. And the reply was, the statement of accounts for 2021 have not been signed off by the external auditors due to an issue regarding infrastructure assets. So I referenced that in the question. But the fact is that the accounts were already 6 months past their statutory deadline before that issue emerged. And so
I'm going to have to press you to get to your question fairly quickly. So I think you've reiterated a lot of what's already been written and published.
I will get to my question. The Chief Executive of Public Sector Audit Appointments has said that late sign-off of accounts is seriously undermining governance and accountability of public bodies. So does the Mayor actually recognise that there is an issue here?
So is that your question? So I'm going to stop you there and say that's your question. Does the Mayor...
And that the Council need to improve their performance with regard to this issue?
I've got the question. Do you recognise that?
I don't even know quite what you're asking there. I mean, we've put an answer in. I was a little bit confused as to whether you were saying that we are the only authority, or were we just the only ones within the West of England Combined Authority. I wasn't sure. An answer's been given to you here, but I mean, I will give you a bit of a reality check. What is more undermining of financial competence and of democratic accountability in local government is crashing the economy with a substandard budget, and then not standing up to adequately fund local government as it takes on the challenges that are coming on. So I would respectfully suggest that you take some time and use some of your considerable accountancy intellectual firepower and have a conversation with your colleagues about how you support Bristol City Council.
And I would respectfully suggest that completely ignores the issue.
So do you have another supplementary? No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on then to Labour question 6, which is Katja, about High Streets Fund?
Thank you for your answer, Mayor. It's a good answer, but can the Mayor please be sure that the officers keep in contact throughout this design process so the community can be assured that their concerns and wishes are carried out and that they don't get a design that's just one size fits all and they have to accept it?
So we will, and I think you'll find, again, as we've talked about what the authority needs to be in the future, and you can see it in our corporate strategy, we talk about being a development organisation. And one of the things we mean by that is that we don't, as a council, just say, right, we're going to go out and we're going to provide these services in abstract, in isolation, and everyone else does what it wants to do, right? And we don't care. What we talked about is how we build relationships and enable and mobilise, around and multiply the effect so that our impact is more than the sum of its parts. And that means that officers will go out and connect with people, whether they be housing officers, community development, whatever. Go out and connect with people and build relationships. What I would say is, and it's a challenge and an ask of this chamber, is there are 70 councillors here who were elected on the basis of being local leaders, enablers, can-do people, make it happen, relationship makers. The council officers are under phenomenal pressure. Often, many of the things that get asked for in this chamber, I will answer, but I'm also very aware that at different points in time, we're asking teams to work on phenomenal hours to get stuff done that this chamber keeps coming and asking for. One of the things that we can do here is officers reach out, yes, but councillors can play the broker role. So rather than an officer having to go out and have 12 meetings, the councillors in an area could use their convening power to get those 12 people in a room at one time, right, and shape a conversation. Then we all move a lot quicker. So that would be my encouragement. We'll do that encouragement, but let's get councillors doing that local convening, organising leadership role too. And then we work as one council.
Thank you. We're going to move on now straight to Conservative question 6, which is John Goulandras, enforcement of street works.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Marvin, for the answers. I'm pleased to see them, actually, because these roadworks have been a real pain, and I'm pleased that they have been inspected by the council, and even more pleased that the contractors have been fined, because they really have been very slow and very poor. I suppose my supplementary to question 2, and if you don't know the answer, happy to have a written response, is it possible for these fines to be even bigger?
John, there's music to my ears. Just a sec. Sorry, they're nationally set. But let me just share with you, when your question came in, this has been a point of real frustration for me. And if Don Alexander was in the front row, he'll tell you. When we came in, we've worked incredibly hard to try and get hold of a no idle. I called it no idle roadworks, right? Someone changed it to active roadworks, but hey, what can I do? I'm just the mayor, right? But the idea is that how many times have we gone past roadworks and we think, what's going on there? And there was a whole set of things we wanted to happen, like signage. This road is being dug up for this reason. And sometimes, as it explained to me as I got my little briefing on roadworks, sometimes when you don't see people doing anything, it's because they have to leave the pipes open while they get the initial, whatever it is, running through the pipes to see if there's any leaks and so forth. So there isn't anyone there, but stuff is happening. I continually talk to Don, talk to the transport team about being harder in our negotiations and firmer in our fines. I've actually phoned up companies myself from my office. I called up chief execs and said, this is what you've done. You have failed to deliver on time. There are consequences for people in Bristol. right? Those are not just inconvenience, but they are financial consequences. And sometimes where we don't have command and control power, what we do have is convening power. And sometimes we have chief execs who want to do the right thing, who don't know that things are underperforming, but what they need is to be reminded that they need to be alerted, just like I do sometimes, to things not going in the way that they would want. So I would be happy to work with you on this. We really are working hard. It is a real frustration of ours to make sure we're getting on top of the city's roadworks.
Do you have another supplementary, John? Perfect, thank you. Moving on swiftly then to Labour question 7, Chris Jackson, onshore wind. One question, one supplementary.
Thank you, Marvin, for your reply. I'm thankful for the Tory government doing another U-turn and lifting the ban on onshore wind. Does that change the council's plans to maybe get more land for us?
Well, it may make more things possible for us, but certainly, and to that extent, it could create much more opportunities for City Leap, which I think is something that we do really need to, well, one is the city needs to understand it. That goes for the people who hold themselves up as commentators on the city as well. And then we need to support it because there's a huge opportunity with that £1 billion over 20 years, around 600 million it's looking like now over the next 5 years, to really to have major investment in our renewable energy. Kai, did you want to say anything on this? Sorry, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, I was just saying with the local plan review as well, we're looking at more allocations in sort of the Avonmouth area for wind turbines. So that's probably the best within our boundary. That's probably the best options. I think there's other options just outside our boundary, but obviously that's not for us to decide. But we would welcome them coming forward as well and neighbouring authorities.
Thank you both.
Thank you. So moving on now to Green question 7, which is Heather Mack. You had a question about CAS grants. One question. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. And I didn't expect to get to question 7. Apologies for many on our benches that are unwell today or couldn't make the earlier time. So we have available a lot of money, 43 million for grants to help people deal with the CAS. That's all sorts of money we can spend on wonderful sustainable travel things. We've only spent 16 million of it thus far. I feel like that's a missed opportunity when we could be encouraging people to get on the bus, to get on Voys, to get out their cars. What else can we and are we doing in terms of getting those grants out there?
I mean, it's 16 million before it started. I think the team has worked incredibly hard. Again, if people are aspiring to leadership, it's about recognising the challenges in backroom capacity. We could also just keep in mind, by the way, when we were negotiating that support package, we had very little support. What we did have was a bunch of people saying, get it done now, and very minimal effort to understand the potential negative consequences for some people of a clean air zone, which is, I don't know if it's a point of self-reflection for you, but I think is something that's worth reflecting on. But I think as an administration, we've done incredibly well to get the clean air zone in and have one of the biggest support packages in the country. In fact, I was on the call last week with core city leaders, and 2 of those leaders were openly said we're envious of the support package you've managed to negotiate for Bristol. And we took our hits, not least from your own party. The price we paid for staying at it with Theresa Coffey, for making the case for the need to support households and businesses, was to hold ourselves up and offer your party an open target to continually criticise us for not getting stuff done. And even the question from Ed Plowden today was raising issues that we were raising 3 years ago when you didn't acknowledge them, was about the potential challenges for people in the transition into a clean air zone world. So to turn up after the fact and to try and pick holes in the support package that we've secured and are distributing to Bristol, I find slightly challenging, to be perfectly honest with you, but unsurprisingly disappointing. But we'll continue to support Bristol people to make sure we have a just transition, and you're welcome to support those efforts.
Thank you. That finishes all the questions from people who are in the room. So we do have one statement. So we'll take that statement from its Councillor Eddy. There'll be no debate on the statements, and you have 1 generous minute to speak to your statement, Councillor Eddy?
I'll summarise because the request is quite simple, of course, Lord Mayor. The Mayor sometimes behaves as if South Bristol doesn't exist, but even he must be aware that people and bishops were angry about his dictator-like intrusion and change of a street name in Imperial Park. Former Labour politician Florence Bray may be a creditworthy lady, but she doesn't have any local link. Moreover, there's a special school in Bristol South already named after her, but of course the Mayor may not be aware of that. It may be off his radar. A compromised proposal. Bristolians and Britons are aware that 2 weeks ago, for the last surviving dam buster, Johnny Johnson, died at his home in Westby on Trim, age 101. Can I just suggest that actually we consider naming it after him?
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. I think that brings the Member Forum questions and statements to an end. Thank you very much for attending today. We will be back in here at 1:45 for our extraordinary meeting. So thank you.